V for Vendetta and Clockwork Orange, because I thought I could write about them most. The first question I thought of was, in both stories, violence is technically used to cure both Alex and Evie, and with Evie it was more effective because she was being tortured and it taught her not to be scared anymore. However, Alex, he wasn't really cured, he was just kind of forced to dislike violence. So using that as a basis, would violence always be the answer? Because in both cases it ended up working for the government, or V in this case, who is the government to Evie. And then I put both V and Alex are anti-heroes, and I was really curious as to why we were rooting for V, even though V was just as despicable as Alex, in the sense that Alex doesn't really have a motive only because he grew up in a violent society, but V's violent and killing people because he's out for revenge, because he was wronged by the government, so he's going out trying to fix everyone, and technically that's not justice, it's revenge, because he was wronged first. So V's more despicable than we think he is, and it's really puzzling to me as to why we root for V and really, really dislike Alex. And the first and the third one are pretty similar. Violence is answered with violence, V being aggressive and Alex, or the Millicents. The Millicents in the Clockwork Orange become overly violent in the end to kind of shut down all the teenage gangs and violence that's going on there. And V, he just goes around killing people as an answer to what he thinks is right, which I already covered. It isn't a great thing to do, but my question was more to revert back to a more primal aspect of human nature, when we're opposed, our natural instinct is to push back, and is that true with violence in today's society? If someone is violent towards us, is it the natural instinct to be violent back, to be revengeful like V is? And then my next point was the Chancellor and Alex are both betrayed by those close to them, but it begins a transition to the good. The Chancellor was betrayed by McCready, I think was his name, one of his inner circle guys. However, the betrayal of the Chancellor caused V to end up getting rid of the Chancellor and helped bring in a new era for the society in V for Vendetta. The same with Alex. It didn't bring in a new society, but it caused a major transition in Alex's life, because without his droogs betraying him, he would never have gone to the Staja, and he would never went through the Ludovico technique, and he would have never realized on his own what it means to be mature and how to actually cure himself. So my question would be, does this disloyalty, does a horrible act always come out with bad consequences? And in broader terms, do the means, an act of disloyalty or an act of betrayal, justify the end? Because both these situations ended up for something pretty good. And then both characters, meaning Evie and Alex, are cured in the end, but by different means. Evie's was through external stimulus, and Alex's true cure, not the Ludovico technique, but when he wanted to be a father, was an internal realization. So my question with that one would be, which is more effective in changing a person's point of view or a person's personality? Would it be their own, changing within themselves, or would it be torture or persuasion in Evie's case? I ended up going with do the means justify the end. Wow, that didn't word that right. Sorry, this is 1 a.m. I promise it wasn't just procrastinating. I fell asleep at 5 o'clock, woke up at midnight, anyway. No, because I used that question because it was more controversial. You could get deeper into it than you could with some of the other basic stuff, and I figured there'd probably be a lot of analysis for that, or that you could twist, because it's vague, and it's something that's always plagued the human race. Is it okay for me to do this if, in the end, it would be better to do it? And as a Christian, I know that no, that's not right. However, in V and Clockwork, it seems to be okay. Adam.
Okay, two things. On your third point, first, do you think that the government, what extent do you think the government is influencing this violent nature in the people? And secondly, do you think that violence is a good answer to what the government is doing, or do you think they could react a different way?
They being like the people like V, or they being the government?
Like V and like Alex. Like, why do you think do you think the government, the general dissatisfaction with the government is what is causing that?
I don't actually think that way. I think if people are in any way upset, their first instinct is to be violent about it, because that's just that comes from the more primal part. Like the first fully developed part of our brain and our rational thinking comes from right here, and that's the last part of our brain to be developed. So even like right now, even though our brains aren't fully developed, and even Mr. Cantor, like if someone were to oppose him and it like really ticked him off, like his first instinct would to be violent. Not that I think you're a violent person. It's just that's what's natural. Like that's the fight or flight mechanism.
So then what is the breaking point from just being annoyed to actually wanting to commit violence? Why do you think what does the government have to do for that to happen?
I don't think the government has anything to do with that. I think that's a personal thing. I think like whatever ticks you off would probably tick me off a lot more because I have a higher temper than you, which is quite obvious. So I'd probably be more likely to get violent over something smaller than you would be. So it's always a personal thing. Like the government doesn't necessarily have a direct role in that.
So you think V is just a naturally violent person?
I think V isn't a naturally violent person. I think the enigma with V is that he's rather intellectual, because when we see inside his lair, he's got like books just lining the walls, like ceiling to floor. Yet he still chooses to be violent. So he's got the secondary aspect of thinking things through down, like he can do it, but he still chooses to be violent. I think that's him being vengeful, because he was wronged by the government and he wants to get back at them. Lindsay.
So I feel like the biggest difference between Alex and V is that Alex actually enjoyed the violence that he was doing onto others, whereas V basically just sees it as like his own version of justice. So even V knows at the end he doesn't deserve to continue living life and enjoying the freedom that he has brought about. He basically commits suicide when he gets on that train.
He was dead before he got on the train.
Oh, okay. Well, he was dead, but he doesn't like he could have ran away with Evie, but he chose not to. So, as Alex, he like basically decides, oh, I'm gonna get married and have kids, and forget that I like brutally murdered and raped tons of people. So I feel like that's the biggest difference between them. But also, I don't know. V sort of like. Well, never mind. That's what I feel is the biggest difference between them. So I would be interested to see how you compare them.
Yeah, like he does. Like it's obvious that he does have a better sense of justice than Alex. I think Alex is completely oblivious. He's entirely selfish when it comes to violence. But like in Inman's class last year, we talked about like if something went wrong in your life and like you took charge of it and you punished the person who wronged you, it was considered revenge. But if someone like a court or if someone else like took revenge for you, it would be considered justice because it wasn't you taking the act. And that's where I'm getting that definition.
Do you think that V thinks that the lives that he's risking because of the actions that he's taking, like all those people that were in that building when the bomb exploded, do you think that V thinks it's worth it because overall the people will be free? So is sacrificing those lives, is being free more important than that?
Like he's posing that question, do the means justify the end? Like, and it's, because like he is a lot more despicable than we think he is. Like kind of the whole base of that question right there. He's awful, but we still root for him, even though he's got a better sense of justice than Alex. Yep. That's a hard question. I think he did think it was worth it to like risk all those people's lives in order to like get a point across to the government. But I don't agree with it. I don't think he should have done that, and I think he chooses to be violent. He chooses to be violent because he knows that like that's what's going to get across to most people. Like violence is most shocking to humans. That's it.
Kind of going off of like what Lindsay said about like the biggest difference between V and Alex and V having a better sense of justice than Alex, I think that like another big difference between the two of them is that when Alex commits like these violent acts, there's no reason for it, like other than I enjoy this is good for me. And even though I think V probably does enjoy the acts of violence that he commits, it's not because he loves violence in itself, it's because he loves that he's paying them back for what they did to him. So like I don't think like V is not an innately evil person. Like we see that he's human because he was mistreated and he was we can all probably understand that impulse to take revenge on someone. Like I think V is much more like relatable as a human. Like it's really hard for any of us to relate to Alex. Like
because how awful he is.
Because of how like he just enjoys it and he wants to do it. I don't think anyone in here like really like experiences that. And like secondly, like you said that it was like a personal thing, like whether or not like the government, like when you were talking to Adam, I think that like I don't know if it's exactly what you're saying, but like the way I see it was like I think that V maybe doesn't have like he's not an innately violent person, and maybe the same with Alex, but like they're more susceptible to violent behavior, like if they're stimulated with it. Like I don't know, like some people in that situation, like I think a lot of people in V for Vendetta were under the same circumstances, but no one felt the need to like respond the way that V did.
Circumstances as V?
Yeah, well I mean like not necessarily the same as V, but everyone in that civilization was oppressed.
Yeah.
Like everyone was experiencing that, but they rather felt the need to not do anything. Like they were able to take it, but there were some people that were just susceptible to that, like and felt the need to rebel. And like I think there are people like in Alex's society that don't do the awful things that he does, but his personality is more susceptible, like to respond to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of like.
So that is interesting because like both of these societies, like I don't know because we weren't told like how it is, and like when V was younger, we just know that when he was taken into the medical testing area. But like in each situation, V and Alex were like they were surrounded by violence. Like that's all they knew. And I assume that while V was in the medical testing area, that like his thought process was severely altered in the sense that like is it alluded that V is the one who blew up the medical thing? So like he's slightly reckless, just a tad reckless and a tad suicidal. So we know that his his thought processes were severely altered when he was in that, and we know that Alex is really screwed up in the head because he enjoys doing all this, and I think that's all a product of the environments they were in. And in this case, the external forces were more effective than the internal forces. Because I know that V has that capability to like say, no, this isn't okay, but he still does it anyway. Interesting.
Do you think V had a greater sense of purpose, like something outside of his revenge? Because in the movie, when he gives Evie the power to make the decision to have the train go blow up Parliament or not, is that V finally getting his revenge, or do you think he wanted change in society because he had been so brutally treated? Like, I mean, I totally understand he wanted revenge. That's why he was going back and killing all of those people that he knew. But he also had, he wanted to make a change in society, and that's what Evie wanted to do. So do you think that even though it was kind of all-consuming revenge, that could have a good output, like he had a greater sense of purpose?
Yeah, I definitely think that V had a better sense of purpose than Alex did, because Alex was just doing it for the heck of it, and that's not a purpose. But like in the beginning, he was definitely in for it just for the revenge. Like that's, I don't know if that's clear to anyone else, but that's very clear to me, because like when something happens to you, like you are so full of rage.
Mm-hmm.
Like all you want is revenge, but like after a while, like you can think about it, and whether or not this is a good thing when you dwell on it or not, like it may not be revenge anymore, but there's still that aspect of revenge in there just because it was done to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is like choosing to reform society, but he's doing it in a way that also suits his needs of revenge.
But do you think that, like, in how you talked earlier about how if you aren't the one taking the action, that it is justice?
Mm-hmm.
Because couldn't you say that V could technically be taking the justice for everyone else that the government had hurt?
You could, but because that he was like,
So personally.
yeah, even he was so personally and so drastically hurt by the government,
Mhm.
but it was Evie the one who took justice.
Mhm.
V most of the time was doing revenge. Like for example, the female doctor who the coroner, I think
Yeah.
she was. Well, like she was sorry about what she'd done. She didn't do any of it with an evil intention.
Mhm.
But he still killed her.
Yeah.
And like that was uncalled for. That was unjust.
Mhm.
So I think that's a really big revenge thing for me.
Okay.
For your second point, like why we root for V and not Alex, I feel like V is like acting on what everyone else is thinking. Like no one in that society really likes the government, and that's kind of proven when they all like dress up as him and go like march over the security people and like rebel themselves. So I feel like we cheer for V because he's the one that like gets everyone's message across, whereas Alex just kind of acts for himself and does whatever he wants and ignores like the desires of others.
Yeah. That's. I mean, like he's easier to relate because you're like he's the good guy because he's doing this for the people, but I don't know. He's just it's a really sly thing. It's like a really sly character trait that like he's actually doing a lot of it for revenge, but he's also doing it for the people. So do you root for him or do you not? Like,
on that same point, I think that language has a lot to do with who we root for, because when we're introduced to V, it's like it's kind of a heroic circumstance, and he's like saving Evie, and then he like gives this like huge speech that's like really like amazing, and it's like it attracts us to him, and he's like, you know, like very intellectual. And Alex, like obviously he's a Druid, and all of their Nadsat language, like it makes us look down upon them, like especially like one of the things I noticed in the first few chapters with the language is like it sounds childish, like some of their words, like zoobies just doesn't sound elegant. You know, it sounds like little kids, and so we look down on him like as somebody who doesn't know what he's doing. He like doesn't have direction, but V like has everything under control.
yeah, it's easier to root for someone who looks like they know what they're doing,
Yeah.
and like, but still, like that's such a creepy thing with V. It's like he makes it sound like he's doing this all for justice and like he's a knight in shining armor when he goes and saves Evie, but he's been killing people for a really long time and blowing stuff up. But like Alex is really, 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 really transparent. Like he sounds brutish and he sounds childish, so it's so easy for us to like look down on him and hate him. So I get what you're saying right there. Yeah, Christine.
Okay, do you think it's necessary to have that person who's willing to kind of like step over the line in order to make a change? Like even if it's a good change? I mean, Alex, because of what happened to him, even though we don't like him, society kind of changed for the better. I mean, well, maybe not necessarily for the better, but I don't know, it changed. And in V, he incited a change. Like, he began it. So does there need to be that one person that is willing to break the rules in order to?
I think, especially in the V for Vendetta world, V was definitely necessary in the sense that everyone else was so scared to do anything else. But he was also used as a scapegoat for a lot of the people. Like if you look at it, like they all got behind him because they knew that he was easier to target than the masses. So if they could go along and support him and overthrow the government, but as long as he's the figurehead and he's the face of the operation, the government would target him and they wouldn't target the masses of people. So it's necessary for them so that they've got someone to blame and eventually someone to arrest. But in Alex's case, I don't think he was necessary. I don't think it was necessary for him to go through the Ludovico technique and for like the government to say, oh, we're so sorry about it. For him to like eventually like mature and for like the change of society was that the Millicents got really, really, really violent and that crime died down because of that.
Yeah.
I don't think Alex was necessary for that.
Okay.
I just think because we're seeing it through his eyes, the Ludovico technique might have seemed more necessary for him to mature, but it didn't influence him all that much when it came to him maturing.
Or do you think that maybe after he had gone through the Ludovico treatment, he saw society more as like an adult would have because he like made that transition? So maybe society was still was still the same, but he just had that different perception.
I don't think so.
Mhm.
I mean, personally, I don't think that after he'd gone through the Ludovico technique, because all that had changed within him is that he couldn't enjoy what he normally enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that means he saw the futility of his actions, because he still like went to like the milk bar and like got high on milk.
Mm-hmm.
So like I mean like he's still really really immature after he comes out of Ludovico, and like all he wants to do is just like do what he was doing before, but he can't do it. So when he finds out that he finally can't do it and he's being tortured by these people, he commits suicide, which is extremely, it's gonna sound really insensitive, but it's really, really childish to do because he doesn't think things through and he's not thinking straight, and that's understandable, but like he could have thought things through, and if he were matured, he would have realized that like this is pointless, like this is not what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the Ludovico technique, I think, just was a major point in his life, but I don't think it caused the maturing.
Okay.
I think what caused the maturing was when he got back, like from, actually you might be right, just for the fact that like, because he wanted to do it so bad and he couldn't do it, and then when he finally was able to do it again, it wasn't as pleasurable for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was decided like, well, this is all pointless anyway. That might have done it, but I don't think like him changing to
It
hate
was
it.
like right after. It was
Yeah.
like cause effect.
Yeah.
Okay.